The cafe door swung inward with a soft chime, letting in a rush of cold air that clung briefly to the girl on crutches. For a heartbeat, she stood motionless at the entrance, framed by the warm amber lights hanging above rows of busy tables. Her red dress, elegant but slightly wrinkled from strain, clung to her as if trying to steady her shaking breaths. She scanned the room with eyes that carried both determination and exhaustion, the kind born from pretending to be fine for too long. Her single leg trembled under her weight, the polished metal of her prosthetic catching the glow of the cafe lights. Every step she took forward came with a quiet, pained inhale she tried desperately to hide. People didn't look at her directly, they glanced, then quickly looked away, as if her struggle was too real to witness. That invisible wall of avoidance wrapped tighter around her chest with every second. She spotted the nearest table, a man in a dark suit perfectly tailored, sitting with a little girl who was swinging her feet happily under the table. The warmth between them made something twist sharply in the woman's stomach. It had been a long time since she'd felt safe enough to sit beside anyone. Another wave of pain surged through her leg, buckling her for a split second. She swallowed hard, embarrassment burning through her. Her voice almost didn't come out when she finally stepped closer. "Can I sit here? Just for a minute?" she whispered, barely audible over the cafe's soft hum. The words trembled, fragile and desperate, as if they cost her more courage than anyone could see. In that moment, standing under the golden lights with cold air still clinging to her skin, she looked like someone trying not to collapse, not just physically, but emotionally too. And for a terrifying second, she braced herself for rejection, the kind she'd learned to expect from strangers who didn't want her pain interrupting their comfort. The man looked up so quickly it was as if her quiet plea had cut through every other sound in the cafe. His suit was sharp, his posture confident, but the moment he saw her unsteady grip on the crutches, something in his expression softened. Surprise first, then concern. The little girl beside him stopped mid-giggle, her tiny hands resting on the table as she studied the trembling woman with wide, curious eyes. For a second, the woman panicked, wishing she could take her words back. Her fingers tightened on the crutches, knuckles whitening. She felt exposed, too close, too needy, too vulnerable. Her throat tightened as her balance wavered again, the strain of her weight pressing into her single leg. Before she could retreat, the man pushed his chair back, the wood scraping softly against the floor. He rose halfway, moving with the gentle urgency she didn't expect from someone in a perfectly tailored suit. His hand reached out, not grabbing her, but offering support, hesitant, respectful, yet steady. "Of course," he said, his voice low, warm, carrying a certainty that made her chest tighten. As he guided her to the chair, her breath shuddered with relief. Her leg finally relaxed, the pain easing enough to let her shoulders drop. She sank into the seat, inhaling deeply as though air had finally returned to her lungs. The steam from the two untouched coffee cups drifted upward, curling between them, blurring the space just enough to make the moment feel surreal. The cafe noises faded into a soft backdrop, the clinking of cups, distant laughter, someone grinding beans. Everything felt far away except this small circle of kindness she'd stumbled into. The little girl tilted her head, studying the newcomer with innocent, unfiltered sincerity. The man glanced from his daughter back to the woman, and the look he gave her wasn't pity. It was something heavier, something that told her he saw her struggle long before she said a word. Her pulse raced, caught between gratitude and fear. She hadn't meant to intrude. She wasn't used to being helped. And yet, for the first time all day, she didn't feel like she was balancing her whole world alone. Steam rose from the coffees in slow, swirling ribbons, drifting between them like a warm veil as an uneasy quiet settled over the table. The woman tried to steady her breathing, but the tremor in her hands betrayed everything she was trying to hide. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table, gripping it as if it were the only solid thing in a world that kept tilting beneath her. She lowered her gaze, hoping the dim lights would mask the shimmer in her eyes. The little girl, no longer fidgeting, leaned forward with the kind of pure curiosity only a child could have. Her small braid slipped over her shoulder as she studied the woman's face, really studied it, as if sensing her pain more clearly than the adults around her. Slowly, shyly, she reached out and touched the woman's sleeve with her tiny fingertips, a gesture so gentle it broke something open inside the woman's chest. "Are you okay?" the child whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the espresso machine. The question was soft, but it hit like a blow, honest, innocent, impossible to brush aside. The woman blinked hard, forcing a nod, trying to hold her face together. But the truth pressed at her throat, heavy and hot. Across the small table, the CEO watched her with quiet intensity. He wasn't staring out of discomfort the way strangers often did. He was watching like a man who had just realized he'd overlooked something important, something human. His jaw tightened, not in judgment, but in recognition, like he knew she was hanging on by the thinnest thread. The girl kept her hand on the woman's sleeve, her tiny presence somehow stronger than any words. And in that fragile triangle of silence, steam rising, rain tapping faintly against the window, distant chatter blending into a muffled hum, the woman felt the wall around her crack. She wasn't okay. She hadn't been for a long time. And the dangerous part was, this little family could see it. The CEO slowly lowered himself to one knee beside her chair, the movement quiet but deliberate, bringing his eyes level with hers. The cafe lights reflected off the dark fabric of his suit, casting soft highlights across his face as he studied her, really studied her. His nearness made her breath catch, not out of romance but out of fear that he would see too much. She tried to turn away, but he gently leaned closer, giving her nowhere to hide without ever touching her. A single tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. But the gesture only made the moment more fragile. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice raw and unsteady. "I just needed somewhere to rest." Her fingers curled around the arm of the chair as if she expected him to take the words the wrong way, to judge her the way others had. People stare, or pretend not to. "I didn't want to bother anyone." Her confession wavered in the air and she looked down, ashamed of the weight in her voice. But the man shook his head slowly, the motion full of certainty, as though he wanted her to feel every inch of reassurance he couldn't put into words fast enough. His daughter watched quietly from the table, her eyes soft and trusting, as if waiting to see whether her father would say the right thing. "You're not a bother," he said, his tone low but firm enough to settle the tremor in her breathing. "You're brave." He paused, letting the words sink into the space between them. Then his voice softened further, "And you're beautiful." There was no performance in the way he said it, no pity, no overly careful sympathy. Just truth, simple and steady, offered to her like a hand extended in the dark. The child nodded beside them, fiercely, almost protective, as if her little heart recognized the woman's hurt even more clearly than the adults did. Her small approval wrapped the moment in something warm and disarming, a gentle reinforcement of her father's words. The woman's lips parted in disbelief, a thin laugh escaping, shaky, fragile, but real. It felt like something inside her chest eased for the first time in hours, maybe days. The tension in her shoulders loosened just enough that she could breathe again, and the ache in her leg seemed to retreat beneath the softer ache blooming in her heart. For a moment, the noisy cafe felt impossibly quiet around them, as if kindness itself had pulled everything else into a softer focus. A shaky breath slipped from her as she leaned back in the chair, the weight she'd been carrying finally easing enough for her body to relax. The cafe's warm glow wrapped around them, softening the edges of the moment as if the world had paused just long enough to let her rest. Outside the window, headlights streaked across the glass like fleeting trails of light, blurring against the faint drizzle. Inside, everything felt still, gentle and safe in a way she hadn't felt for far too long. The CEO pulled the empty chair closer, not crowding her but closing the space, just enough to make it clear she wasn't meant to leave anytime soon. His daughter scooted her small cup toward the woman, as if offering a silent invitation to join their little world. The gesture made warmth bloom inside the woman's chest, a simple kindness that hit harder than anything grander could have. For a moment she watched the child's innocent smile, then looked at the man whose gaze held steady with quiet reassurance. She felt her fear soften, dissolving into something lighter, something like hope. It had been so long since she'd felt seen without being judged, helped without being pitied, welcomed without needing to apologize for existing. The CEO noticed the way her shoulders lowered, the way her breathing evened out. "You can stay as long as you want," he said softly, his hand resting on the table near hers, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. His daughter nodded again, her feet swinging gently under the chair as if she already considered. The woman part of their little circle, the woman exhaled slow and trembling, letting the moment settle into her bones. For today, just today, she wasn't fighting alone. No rushing, no explanations, no bracing herself for the next harsh stare. Only warmth, unexpected kindness, and the quiet sense that maybe the world still held pockets of gentleness in it. Her heart finally stopped racing. The pain in her leg dulled. And for the first time that day, she allowed herself to believe she was safe, welcomed, and just maybe worthy of this small, beautiful moment.